you have to talk to your customers. You have to be out from behind your desk, work with the salespeople, figure out what makes them tick. How can they drink the Kool-Aid that you're pouring them? Because if you can't get to that level, again, all the analysis in the world, if you can't get it in front of the salespeople, in front of the customers, it's a waste of time.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
It's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the impactful relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today, our guest is Jim Broderick. And here are 3 things you want to know about Jim before we start. He started his career as a carpenter. Wow. And he worked his way up to be a VP of pricing at United Site Services. And I have to tell you, he's here because John Jennings told me he made a $125 million impact on a $1 billion company in 3 years. And everybody should want to know how he did that. And by the way, he and I both love mountain biking. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, so how did you go from being a carpenter to being in pricing?
So I went through high school, struggled getting into college. Believe it or not, I historically flunked math. It just, every time I tell that story, people do the same thing you did. But I realized that I liked working with my hands and I liked being able to build things. And so I gravitated towards carpentry and ended up paying for college, framing houses, and stuck around with it for a little while. And I looked around at the people I was working with, and they were 40 and they looked like they were 60. And I said, maybe this isn't for me long term. So I ended up with a sales job working at a building materials company. And that segued into me working on basically a quote desk.
Yeah, I got to tell you, one of the things I love about your story there, and it has nothing to do with pricing, is that I think people who pay for their own college value their education way more than, okay, I'll confess, my dad paid for my college. And at the time, I didn't think it was that cool or important. It was just like I had to keep going to school. So in a lot of ways, I envy you. I know it was much harder, but from an attitude or growth perspective, boy, I think that was awesome.
So I'll tell you, Mark, back in the Middle Ages when I went to school, it was definitely more affordable than it is today. So I was able to work a couple of jobs and put myself through school versus, my kids today, there's no way. And my kids work their tails off 2 and 3 jobs in the summertime. And there was no way they could work hard enough to pay for their college. So it was a different world altogether. I valued my education, yes. I valued the 4 years I spent in college as much as the educational process. I was much more on the EQ than I was on the IQ side of the fence.
Yeah. I think we're going to get to that point in a few minutes, but I want to start. You've been in both consulting and in the industry side. First off, is that true? Because you've got this look on your face like maybe you weren't in consulting.
When you look at my LinkedIn page, I spent about just shy of a year working for myself, consulting with small businesses.
Okay.
That was more. It was a great opportunity for me to step back and figure out what I wanted, but it was more a job loss scenario than it was anything else. Got it.
Okay. And so then tell me, why do you stay in pricing, right? I love the fact that you got there from a quote desk. So I don't know if there's a more beginner job than being on a quote desk. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. And yet you said, I'm going to stay in pricing, and you've worked your way up to an executive level pricing position.
So I started my career in sales, and I was a sales and marketing guy. And the whole time I was in it, I wanted to be a product manager, not a pricing person. And that just didn't transpire. But what I found as I was doing it was I took to Excel, right? And I know that we all talk about how we want to get out of Excel and the whole 9 yards. I took to Excel very well. And to me, there was a definite correlation between building houses and building models in Excel, right? And you're putting your hands on stuff and it's coming, you can see at the end of the day work, right? And so that, to me, that it was a good transition for the way my brain worked. But the other thing, Mark, that I find more than any other role, and my career has jumped me into a finance department, dumped me into product and product management, all in a pricing role. No other discipline, maybe other than IT, has you working in the middle of a company. I like to say when I'm talking to people about pricing, I'm the middle of the Rubik's Cube. Everything else is rolling around me, and I'm in the middle of the Rubik's Cube, keeping it all together and making sure that the colors are lining up.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I want to go back to the Excel comment for a second, because it's a thought I haven't perfected. And so let me just test it on you and you can say, modify it. I think all these companies have really nice BI systems now with tons and tons of data. And yet, if you really want to do something new, explore, try to figure out what is the data really telling us, when you put it in Excel and you start playing in Excel and you master Excel, you start to truly understand what's going on in your data. Does that make sense to you, or would you say, no, all the BI tools can do that today?
So I'd say that there's probably a combination of both. The truth is somewhere in the middle. My company is moving to Tableau. One of the things I never fully understood is why Power BI, Tableau, Spotfire, why do they use a different formulaic language when everybody knows Excel, right? Everybody knows Excel, but yet they're forcing us to learn a new language, which we do. And I have people on my team and they're younger, so they can learn the new languages. But at the end of the day, it just feels so much easier to dump it into Excel. And because Excel rolls out of our fingertips, the language of Excel rolls out of our fingertips.
I wonder if that's because you and I are old and we grew up on Excel and not on Tableau or Power BI. Correct.
I think that that's a piece of it. But I also think, because I talk to other people around my company, and it's a thought process that's universal, is that they all use different formulaic languages. And at the end of the day, whether you're doing optimization in R or Tableau or Excel, it's the same basic math, but you have to, learn different ways of writing that math.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So I was playing on your LinkedIn page, and while I was on your LinkedIn page, you got a recommendation from a gentleman named Krishna. I won't give you his last name for now, but I want to read the second paragraph of what he wrote, because I find this paragraph so powerful. And after I read it, I'll make a comment on it. He wrote, "What impressed me most was his ability to build trusting relationship and gain credibility with a diverse set of stakeholders in the business community, and how quickly he became a trusted advisor." Okay, I think this is a skill that every pricing person needs, very few have. Did you plan that out? Was that just your nature? Was it a strategy? How did you get to that?
So what I'll say is this: I've been fortunate in my career to have worked at some really tremendous companies, and within those companies worked for some really tremendous people. But my first job transition happened after I was at my first company for 17 years, right? It was traumatic. And one of the things I learned, because at the time we had a German high school exchange student living with me when I was making this transition, and she was becoming fluent in English. And one of the things I realized was that changing jobs is like learning a new language. I was constantly translating the problems I saw in front of me back to my first company. How did I solve it and translate it back? And what I found was that as I've moved from company to company, the process of learning a language becomes easier. And the sooner you can learn the inner workings of that company, the sooner you can work across a broad group of people to move them in the right direction. That's part of it. But I think people in pricing come from a number of different backgrounds. I think I had the benefit of coming from a sales background because, part of what we do is we have to sell our story. We have to sell to the business why it's important to do things the way we do.
And so explain, do you think this skill is important for other pricing people? And I say that because I can imagine there are a ton of pricing people out there right now thinking, oh my God, I love Excel. I love Tableau. I love doing the analytics. Don't make me talk to someone in sales. Right?
So I think, Mark, if you want to advance to the level of director or above in the pricing world, you have to put yourself in front of the business. You have to, right? I have a saying that I repeat all the time to anyone who will listen to me. We can create the most math-based, value-based, algorithmic-based price you can come up with. If sales can't translate that and sell it, it's a waste of time, right? Sales has to take what we do and embrace it and sell it to the customer, right? Value-based pricing, in my mind, there's no such thing as value-based pricing. In my mind, we are a component of value-based selling.
Yep.
And so, we have to be able to put ourselves in front of salespeople to get them to buy what we're selling.
Yeah. And I often, in a very similar vein, I say if sales is asking for discounts too big too often, it's because you haven't given them the tools, knowledge, and confidence that they can win deals at the prices you think they should win at.
Right. So it's like value-based. I've been doing this for coming up on 20 years now. My first PPS conference, I heard people talking about value-based pricing. It was years before I saw what value-based pricing was and how you achieve it. Everybody talked about it. It wasn't until the likes of Stefan Lazau started doing research into it, and like the work that Leverage Point put together into their tool, that you started to kind of put a foundation to value-based pricing. But I still say it's as much in the sales world as it is in ours.
Yeah. I can imagine every audience member right now saying, okay, what is value-based pricing? Right? What's different about it between today and 20 years ago?
Are you asking me that question?
I am asking you that question.
So
they want to know what you learned. What do you think is different?
So identifying value drivers in a business, quantifying those value drivers, and then training your salespeople to change the conversation from price to the value drivers that are important to that customer. And value drivers cannot be internal. Value drivers have to be external from the customer. So you can't, a company can't say, well, this is what a customer values, right? Customers have to tell you what's important to them. And then it's our job to quantify those value drivers into how do we solve those pain points within our company better than the next best alternative.
Yeah.
Right. Some cases you may be the low cost provider, and that's what your value driver is. Hey, I'm a good enough and I'm the lowest price out there. Right. And that may be it. But that's, it's in my mind, that's kind of the big advances that I've seen in the last, say, 7 years, 5 to 7 years versus what was out there before. There was some economic value estimating and some stuff that was done early on, but I didn't see any real good teeth in that until, some of the leverage point stuff in since then.
Nice. I love your answer. I have to say this morning, because the comment you made that said value drivers are different for each customer. And just this morning, I came up with an example of that I want to share with you real quickly. And that is a box of tissues, right? I love Puffs tissues. And I tell my wife all the time, you got to buy Puffs tissues. And if you were to guess why I love Puffs tissues, you'll never, ever figure it out. But I like Puffs tissues because the box is short enough to fit in my desk drawer. Right? And so that's my value driver. And if you don't ask me the question, you're never going to know the answer to that.
Right. right? And that's a great example, right? That's a great example. In my current business, we serve, probably a half a dozen key segments. And, you could ask one of those customers in that segment what's important to them, and you can ask another customer in the same segment what's important to them, and you may get two different answers. I went through this process at Iron Mountain, and we started by asking the salespeople what was important to the customers, right? And then we went out and asked the customers what was important to the customers, and it was two different things.
Isn't that fascinating and sad at the same time?
Salespeople, I know because I was a salesperson, I couldn't wait to show up and throw up, right? To show up and tell this customer all the reasons why they needed to buy my product and why my product was the best in the world. Back then, nobody told me, you got two ears and one mouth, dummy, listen twice as much as you talk.
Yep.
And I happen, I never got that value-based selling training, but that's kind of, and that's where a lot of salespeople are at, is in the VP of sales we have here is instituting a value selling process. And he says that all the time. Don't show up and throw up. Talk to the customer, nice. Ask probing questions, find out what's important to them. What are their pain points and how can you solve their problems?
Nice. Okay. I haven't asked this question directly yet, so it's time. How did you make $125 million impact?
So I'd love to say it was me, but there's a whole team that is involved there. And I think that the most important thing is that you have an executive team that sees price as a proactive lever and not a reactive pain point, right? And so we've all worked in companies where the pricing guy is trying to control discount and he's pushing the ball up the hill, and the salespeople are saying, well, our prices are too high and we have to discount in order to get the sale, and the sales leadership and the CEO is on the same bucket. I love the analogy that Reed Holden made years ago when he talked about the white horse syndrome, where the VP of sales, swoops in and drops the price and saves the customer. And that I've worked in companies that are like that, and you don't get traction from a pricing leverage standpoint. That's a reactive pricing world. I work in a company where the CEO feels like we have tremendous pricing power, right? That we offer a service and that we have tremendous pricing power. It was my job to go get it. And so there was a whole lot of, I've been out in front of salespeople probably 4 times now. I'm traveling next week for the first time for a pricing summit for one of our regions. We're going to spend 8 hours talking about price. That's a daunting task, by the way, putting together content for 8 hours that keeps people engaged, right?
Yes.
But I've been in front of the salespeople probably 3 times now in my 3 years. I'm constantly on the phones with them. So my C-suite people, they believe we have tremendous pricing power. They said, go get it. Now it's my job to implement the processes that we need to do. So there's a combination of annual price increases. There's a combination of contract management, which didn't exist before I got here. Part of it is selling myself to the salespeople so they believe, the process that we're engaging in. We engage in a pair-based pricing, and it's my job to make sure that that it's simple enough that black box that we have, I like to say it's more of an opaque box, is simple enough for them to understand that when I give them a price, it's the right price for the right customer at the right time, and that they don't have to go back to their notebook or the top of their head to come up with a price on their own. So we've been doing that now over the course of 3 years, and we've had really good success. But it's, like I said, and we're a team of 3 right now. I have 2 price analysts that work for me. Actually, I now have a price manager and a senior price analyst, but we've had tremendous success over the last 3 years. It's been a great journey.
I can imagine anytime a new pricing person walks into a company, they're going to find lots of places where we're leaving money on the table, where we're not doing a good enough job at at creating value, communicating our value, capturing the value. Can you give us a couple examples of those that you dealt with, just so that people can know what types of things they would be looking for?
So I'm not going to, I don't even think that we've even started down the value road yet at my company, right? We, the 3 years that we generated that was all blocking and tackling, right? So one of the first places I started, we have an annual price increase process. We're a service company. We have a general price increase on a yearly basis. The salespeople had full autonomy to exclude customers from that increase. And so the first year I was here, we had maybe a 30% stick rate, right? The salespeople basically excluded 70% of the customer base. Well, 70% of the available revenue.
Right.
Right.
Right. And that's tiny, by the way. 30% is a low number.
Oh, it was way low. Right. So we're now, somewhere around an 83, 84% stick rate. Right. So that means that for every dollar of increase that was available, we're only getting 30 cents before.
Yep. Well,
now,
out of curiosity,
we're getting close to 85.
Did you compensate the salespeople for it?
Nope. Not yet. Not yet. So compensating salespeople based off of price or price increase or something to that effect. I know that it's out there. I know companies do it. If anyone who's listening to your podcast has ideas and want to reach out to me, please. It's on the roadmap of things that we're going to check off. But I think that if you think of it, I think of this as like a pyramid. We're still in that first to second layer in the pricing journey. Value-based pricing is at the very tip. To me, sales compensation is somewhere in the middle. So we're slowly ticking away to that process.
Okay, here's what I love about
but that stick rate piece was huge, right?
Oh,
as we cycle through it, the salespeople, and then part of what we had to do was we had to train them on having that conversation with their customers. Right? If it was easy for them to exclude them, we had to train them on having that conversation of why it was important. And we even went as far, our technicians are basically truck drivers. And 3 years ago when I started, Amazon started paying their truck drivers $100,000 a year. We use that in our, it's not all about site services and porta potties, because at the end of the day, that's what I do. It's about delivery. It's about truck driving. It's about waste disposal. So, changing the conversation, and training them was really important.
Yeah, without a doubt. What I love about the story you just told, though, is you've made $125 million impact out of about $1 billion in revenue. So that says you've done a 12.5% increase in profitability, and you're only at the bottom layers of the pyramid.
Yeah.
I love that.
So that 125 occurred over 3 years. I think the first year was probably somewhere around 28. Last year was probably somewhere around 50 or 60, right? Somewhere in there. But the beauty of price increase is that 28 that I started with. It's not like sales where you start from zero again and you're moving forward. That now becomes my foundation, and I'm building on top of that.
Yep.
Right. And so that 125 is there, and we're building on top of that. And I work for a VP of finance in my current role, and he likes to say it's stripping from the ceilings. You just need the right buckets to be able to grab it.
Yeah, I think that is so true. Jim, this has just been fascinating, but we're running out of time. Last question. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
If you haven't figured out, Mark, I'm a sales guy at heart, right? And I talk about sales enablement and sales training a lot. One of the things you said earlier to me was, that guy or that lady in the spreadsheet in the Tableau workbook who doesn't want to talk to salespeople. I'd say even take it one step further, get in front of customers. Because at the end of the day, we are all customers who have to pay a price for something. You have to talk to your customers. You have to be out from behind your desk. work with the salespeople, figure out what makes them tick. How can they drink the Kool-Aid that you're pouring them? Because if you can't get to that level, again, all the analysis in the world, that's the last mile that you see in the delivery world, right? That's the last mile that Amazon got really good at, right? You can get it to that point, but if you can't get it in front of the salespeople, in front of the customers, it's a waste of time. Truly, I believe that. In my core, I believe that.
Fabulous, fabulous answer. Jim, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
So I'm pretty open on LinkedIn. My profile is public to everybody, Jim Broderick. There's a couple of them out there, but I think most of the pricing world I'm either first or second contacts already with. Or if you want to reach out to me directly, jim.broderick@unitedsiteservices.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Episode 122 is all done. Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, please leave us a rating and a review. And if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or about pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.